Greetings. In this video I'll be painting a veteran Legionary for the Sons of Horus Legion. This model is wholly custom. Check the description for a disclaimer. This guy's wearing Mark 6 armour, and I've given him a Phobos pattern combi grenade launcher, and a bionic leg. Other than that, it's a fairly standard Legionary. After assembly I primed the model black through my airbrush, though our rattle can spray primer also works. For the first step I used Lupercal green, using a craft brush, and applying a few thin coats to get full coverage over the armour. I feel it's necessary to mention the colour shown here looks a lot less blue in real life. I think it's due to the cold light I use, and my camera. To highlight, I decided to try a different method, starting by doing a fairly heavy dry brush with Sons of Horus green. This brings the brightness up a fair bit, helping it match the references better, though I couldn't get it to hit all the spots I wanted lighter. I switched to a stippling method to reach the surfaces I was missing with the dry brush. When thinned properly, which I failed to do, it creates a smooth gradient. The result here looks alright, but the texture is built up a bit. I wanted to highlight the green, but the Citadel range doesn't have one that suited the teal colour, so I mixed some Sons of Horus green with Dorn yellow to get a slightly lighter tone. I went back to Lupercal green and did a light pass of stippling over the lower sections. It's not that noticeable, but I think it may have helped a tiny bit. Next I thinned out some Sons of Horus green to a glaze-like consistency, and painted over a bunch of panels to help smooth out the stippling. Finally, I mixed Sons of Horus green and Dorn yellow again, this time on my wet palette, and used that to do an edge highlight over a bunch of spots. I think this looks better than using plain Cyberite green, which would have turned the teal a lot more green. Next, I prepared the pauldron and the remaining upper greave for decals with a gloss varnish. This helps prevent silvering around the edges of the decals, as well as protecting the paint from any solvents used. I apply the decals off camera with Microset and Microsol. I put the Legion Armorial and Ordinal on the pauldron, and another decal on the greave. Onto black now. I used Abaddon black to paint in the pauldron, the gun casing, and the undersuit. I missed the ribbing on the power pack, and would paint that in off camera later. For the metallics I used Iron Warriors, painting in the weapon body, the power pack details, the cabling on the torso, though I forgot to do the chest bits until later, and the bionic leg. For the molecular bonding studs I went with a pale gold, specifically Liberator gold. I also used this for the cartridges in the magazine window, the banding towards the top of the bionic leg, and the faceplate. I was inspired by this Sergeant in Mark 6 armour, and a veteran with an aggressor helmet. The gold was a bit more yellow than what I was aiming for, so I tried using Reichlin Flesh Shade over it, as both a wash and to stain the colour a bit. Now onto Mephiston red for the cabling on the armour and bionic leg, as well as the lenses on the helmet and the weapon scope. Next I switched to Runefang steel and highlighted all the silver bits, basically anywhere that was upwards facing or close enough. I also dotted the rivets on the power pack. Having highlighted most other colours, I switched to Mechanicus standard grey and highlighted the black, as well as applying some scratches to represent battle damage and general wear and tear. Going back to the red, I used Sunz Scarlet and did a small highlight on all of the previously applied red. For the lenses specifically, I used Wild Rider Red and built up an additional layer towards the middle of the face, and towards the top right of the optics. To finish these off I used Lugganath Orange, painting in a thin line for the eyes and a small dot for the sensors. Having done some weathering for the black already, I decided to do the same for the rest of the armour. I switched to Rhinox hide and painted in tiny dots and scratches along many of the armour panels. Lastly, I got out a dark sepia enamel pin wash and painted over most of the model. This helps add definition by shading the recesses, which especially helps around fine details like the port on the right pauldron. I left the model for an hour before applying my usual basing method, then sealing everything in with an ultramatte varnish. And here we have it. A veteran legionary from the 16th Legion, the Sons of Horus. I'm super pleased with this one. I think the colour came out nicely, being a mix of the older, more olive green, and the deep teal that the more modern interpretations display. That being said, it was fairly messy and disorganised to get to this position. The paint needed to be thinner when I was stippling, and the dry brush could have been a little less dry. So if you're following along, hopefully you do a better job than I do. I think the gold turned out nicely. It was a bit pale at the start there, but the Reikland flesh shade definitely helped. I wasn't sure about making the faceplate gold, and I'm still not sure. It's definitely a look. As for the model itself, I'm pretty happy with how beefy it made Mark 6 armour look. The bionic leg might be carrying a fair bit though. In other news, my printer's still out of action. I've created a support ticket, but I'm only getting templated responses directing me to their wiki, which doesn't solve anything unfortunately. I mentioned in a previous video that I do still have some other models ready to paint, and some pauldrons with various chapters on them ready to build. So I'm not going to run out anytime soon, but let's just hope that I get the printer up and running again before I run out of models. Anyway, leave any requests or questions in the comments, and hope you stick around for the next one.